Thinking back to when I learned to read French in elementary school, I, my grade 1 teacher taught me to sound out the letters after the syllables and finally words. And about the same time I learned to write, it was indisputable I had to put at least one finger between words to have a proper word spacing to make this composition legible. To be able to make sense of the words and sentences, punctuation was a very important factor in silent reading. Being a teacher today, I observe students having a great deal with the process of writing and struggling with reading. Students are creating different representation of the words and try to simplify the writing process. This brings me to try to understand how punctuation came from its invention to today's use and transformation of our literacy in the 21st century. Today, everyone is expected to embed punctuation when writing. It brings the text to life by making it more legible and easier to understand. But it hasn't always been that way. How did this technological innovation, punctuation, modify the look and feel of communication through centuries? At first, humanity had an oral culture, where words were transmitted from mouth to ear from one generation to the next. In the process of keeping history alive, societies found ways to keep record of their memories. It is known that Greeks, Egyptians, Chinese, and Romans did use writing for millennia, but the act of writing wasn't standardized during those times. Houston discussed in early democracies such as Greece and Rome, where elected officials debated to promote their points of view, eloquent and persuasive speech were considered more important than written language, and readers fully expected that they would have to pore over a scroll before reciting it in public. The writing was done on multiple surfaces, depending on the origins of the writers, and the act of reading was a machine for producing sounds, as Vembro puts it. Reading aloud was the normal way to read literary text, either before an audience, with friends, or alone. Texts were built with no spaces, nor punctuation, and without any distinction between lowercase and capital. It was left to the reader to interpret and make sense of the compounded words. To be able to understand the text on a first reading was unheard of, said Houston. It was named the Scriptura Continua. Before the 3rd century, only one symbol supported the reader, the paragraphos. It could have been a simple horizontal line or a symbol written beside the main text. It was up to the reader to determine what was the meaning of it. Change of topic, new stanza in a poem, or change speaker in a drama. In the 3rd century BC, in the Hellenic Egyptian city of Alexandria, a librarian named Aristophanes, chief of staff to the city's famous library, found the need to use signs to help understand the text easier. He started to mark the documents he read with little inky dots, punctus in Latin, leading to punctuation, that indicated pauses. Each one wedged carefully between adjacent letters, so that reading became marginally easier. A dot in the middle signified the shortest pause, called a comma. For an intermediate pause, known as the colon, the dot was at the bottom, and the period was the longest pause, represented with a dot at the top of the line. These evolutions helped the reader better understand the texts that were written for memories to last. The function of punctuation changed when silent reading was introduced, in that of systematic introduction of blanks between words came into being. From that time, punctuation became much more linked to textual organization and began to be considered the task of the writer. It is much more difficult to read and understand when writing is done without any spaces and punctuations. As the Roman Empire crumbled in the 4th and 5th centuries, Rome's pagans found themselves fighting a losing battle against a new religion called Christianity. Whereas pagans had always passed along their traditions and culture by word of mouth, Christians preferred to write down their psalms and gospels to better spread the word of God. Books became an integral part of the Christian identity, acquiring decorative letters and paragraph marks, and many were lavishly illustrated with gold leaf and intricate paintings. Spreading across Europe, the rejuvenation of punctuation by the Christians helped keeping the meaning of their words through the times. It's at the end of the 7th century that Isidore de Seville, first archbishop and later beatified to become a saint, reorganized the symbols and gave them meaning. As Houston argued, towards the end of the 8th century in the nascent country of Germany, The famed King Charlemagne ordered a monk named Alcuin to devise a unified alphabet of letters that could be read by all his far-flung subjects, thus creating what we know as lowercase letters. Writing had come of age, and punctuation was an indispensable part of it. In the 14th and 15th century, because of the invention of the printing press, a standard system of punctuation was urgently required. Punctuation usage transformed from a question of taste to a matter of logic, and the establishment of natural science model of grammar. Through the process of improvement, pages started to see rubrications in margins, as the specialized script supplemented it with additional text in reading for emphasis. The practice entailed by this process would mark the end of a section and play the role of heading, or emphasize annotations. After the invention of the printing press, readers still expected the rubrication, which was done with red ink and with time became more of a decorative aspect. The development of punctuation is of psycholinguistic and educational importance because it is an aspect of writing that has to do with text construction, and it is hard to submit it to precise norms as is the case for spelling. For example, norms in word spelling were established in languages a long time ago. On the other hand, punctuation offers more flexibility, meaning it is a bit more difficult to assess. Punctuation is taught in schools with generally more normative rules to shape kids' learning with some basis. Nevertheless, the stylistic choices of the writer offer more acceptance. Ferrero and Pontecorvo argued that punctuation appears in children's writing only when their writings are literate. As mentioned earlier, punctuation supports silent reading, which students need at some point to go through schools and university. They have the option to delve deeper in readings, opportunity to work in teams, and share the load and better understand the meaning of their reading. Reading is a complex skill that is highly dependent on how it's been learned, but also on the nature of the text to be read and the media on which the text is written. History of reading traveled from oral to codex to the printing press and the screen. The first improvements allowed for a cheaper device, more compact and easier to conceal. Later, it freed one hand for the reader. Those developments through the centuries made silent reading a lot easier and come forth. It promoted the autonomous cognitive experience and made it distinct from the spoken word. It allowed the readers to understand verbal content at their own pace. With the advent of the first personal computer, the writing experience improved a lot and offered so many possibilities that it's been adopted in most professions for the production of text, but the reading on screen experience didn't quite follow at first. It's only with the development of the internet that the problem of the portability was solved. From the Sumerian tablet to the iPad, a large step opened another world for learning. Nowadays, the experience is just offering a better experience to the user, with accessibility options and improved screens. What else does it bring? We went from majuscule scripts with no spaces, neither punctuations, to emoticons. The term, a blend of emotion and icons, refers to graphic signs such as smiley face that often accompany textual computer-mediated communication. Is the emoticon the new punctuation? These little funny symbols are another way to communicate and express emotions or feelings. Through writing, it takes more creativity and a lot of words to express feelings and make sure the reader feels it. Emoticons are another form of punctuation in between words to express how the writer feels. It is more visual and, as the expression says, an image is worth 1,000 words. Emoticons are almost universally conceived of as nonverbal indicators of emotion. They are construed as indicators of affective states, to support of which is to convey non-linguistic information that in face-to-face communication is conveyed through facial expression and other bodily indicators. Nowadays, these emoticons are exposing more than just emotions, and researchers observe that they are used not as signs of emotion, but rather as indicators of illocutionary force of the textual utterance that they accompany. Dresner and Herring argued that the uses of emoticons are as indicators of illocutionary force can be viewed as an expansion of text in the same way that, for example, question marks and exclamation marks are. These marks were also late additions to text, that their early uses were not subject to widely agreed upon convention. As a conclusion, the evolution of punctuation has been a slow process and it is still young in the age. As discussed, the tools are still improving quickly and reading is changing. The improvements from the beginning of writing and the infancy of silent reading demonstrated really efficient. Still, in our school, we are teaching students these basic technologies to be able to communicate properly with the others. People need to connect with neighbors to let the world know that they are alive. Today's technologies offer opportunities to develop and improve again on this matter. I suppose we are taking the lead. In the end, did the smiley face become the next evolution in writing and reading?